secrets to a lasting marriage.
Hear from America's marriage doctor on ways to make it through those big waves of emotion for lasting love.
I don't know why. Can't get enough of your love.
Do you ever wonder what makes a successful marriage work? Well, we recently sat down with America's marriage doctor, Jacqueline DelRosario. She's an author, speaker, and certified marriage counselor, and she stresses that there is nothing wrong with the whole institution of marriage. Problem is, there's a lack of compatibility with many couples. So here are the 5 key things that she says make a marriage successful. You got to have compatibility, intimacy, acceptance, authenticity, and communication.
There's a 4-letter word associated with marriage, and it's called work. And so I think accepting that on the front end, instead of this fallacy that, you're going to meet this prince, he's going to take you off into, never land, and you're going to live happily ever after. It's just that it's a fantasy. You can go to Disney World for that. But you really need to know that working through relationship issues is part of the things that we have to do to make it work. The most important issue that I see is a lack of compatibility. People are marrying that should never be together in the first place, and so they're making a bad decision and they're trying to make that work. And so compatibility is 80% of your success rate in marriage. Marrying the right gal or the right guy is really the start. And so teaching people relational skills, I think, is really important. Learning how to understand or gauge compatibility starts with them knowing what they want, who they are. And so I think that that's the #1 problem.
She is so insightful. Okay, so all 3 of us are married, so I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think makes a marriage work?
Okay.
Ladies first.
Ladies first. Okay, I'm going to say respect, not only for each other, but respect for each other's friends and family. And then maybe also respecting your personal space and individuality, because you're a unit, but you're still individual. So I would say that.
Really
2
good.
words for me. Ding, ding, ding. What she said, work. Because it is work. I mean, it's whether it's a marriage or a job, the more work you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it.
Yes.
And then I think the art of compromise.
Oh, that's a big one.
Right.
That's a big one.
Yeah,
and how
on the
you
nail.
can compromise where both parties feel like they're getting a win.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do.
It
It's
is.
very, very hard to do.
I absolutely think compromise, that is big. At least, in our relationship, and what Steven says, happy wife, happy life.
Yeah.
It's that easy. Just kidding. Really, I'm not. Well, Dr. DelRosario had a lot more great insight, including whether couples should stay together for the kids' sake, and how do we move on after a divorce. We'll have more on that ahead at 5 o'clock. In the last hour, we heard from Dr. Jacqueline DelRosario, also known as America's marriage doctor. Well, this time she talks about a topic some couples face when having marital problems. Should you stay together for the sake of the kids? Dr. DelRosario believes you should, because divorce can be traumatic for children. She says as long as there isn't any kind of abuse in your marriage, and if there is still a way to stay together, get the tools you need for help, even if it involves counseling. But if divorce becomes an option, here's how to move on.
Well, first of all, divorce is equated to death, the grieving process. So I think you need to give yourself the opportunity to go through those phases and get over the grieving. And then begin to set a trajectory for your new direction. What is it going to be? What are you pursuing for yourself? And I think that in order to capture that, you need to start with developing self, making sure you're whole, figuring out what you want, who you are. Do you value self? Do you know self well enough? And then you're better able to figure out who is compatible with you, with your direction, your needs and desires. And then I would start setting out on finding that person. That in and of itself is an adventure.
Now, Dr. DelRosario told us that she is a child of a divorced couple. Her parents were actually married for almost 40 years, and they divorced when she was 32. And she says it was extremely traumatic, and it took her a good 2 years to just get back up on her feet again.
2 years?
2 years. Very traumatic.
Wow.
Dr. DelRosario also adds that the divorce rate is specifically 49%. But Scott, I'm wondering this.
Okay.
Out of all divorces, how many of those cite financial issues as a reason for divorce?
That's a biggie.
Yeah.
That's the biggest, right?
Well,
It's up there. It's up
Yeah.
there. I'm going to say 65%.
that's high. I thought it would be high. She says 35%.
Really?
Isn't that an eye-opener?
Really?
And all the time, you always hear, money being such a big issue, but she says 35% cite financial issues.
I will tell you, both me and my wife think very differently about divorce and kids now that we're parents.
Absolutely.
Before, at least for us, before we had kids, it was like, well, if you do this or if you do this, out of here. No, not anymore.
It's totally different when you have kids.
It's totally different.
And you
because
would stay
it's a
together.
Unit.
Yeah.
We would. We
Yeah.
would. I mean, again, like you said, put abuse and all that over here.
Right.
Totally separate issues. But yeah, we'd stick it out. Yeah, you bet. You know what? Going through a divorce, obviously hard enough. But if you have kids, it can certainly be traumatic for the family. Our lawyers on call can help you. Give them a call with your questions about divorce or about child custody. They're taking calls until 7 o'clock tonight. Your couple of numbers, 602-258-1212 or 888-838-5769.